Welcome to the Agile HR Community Virtual Meetup. And this is part of a special series where we look at how people are using Agile mindset as well as the tools and practices that exist in the range of Agile practices. And we use that to respond to this amazing crisis that we're finding ourselves in, which has probably been the biggest disruption to some of our working lives and our home lives that most generations have experienced. This was inspired by stories that were coming into Rena and I of people using Agile HR skills in their daily work to guide their decisions and prioritize how they focus their time, energy, and money on the right things for their people. Today, we're going to look very specifically at how Agile helps you make tough decisions. And we're all facing these both in the workplace, but also actually a bit in our home. And we're going to look at things like how do we define value, how do we prioritize, how do we assess risk, and how do we know that we are really focusing on the right things. So we're going to look a little bit at those tools, and then we're going to talk to some fantastic people that are going to give us very real practical examples of how you can do this in your own workplace. So a bit of background to get us started. The Agile HR community is a learning forum where we bring HR as well as people and cultural professionals together, and we help them embrace the Agile mindset. And this is all about how do we start to modernize HR and people practices for the future of work. We do this through a range of initiatives. So we run a certified Agile practitioner program. We do learning events across the world. We used to do a lot of face-to-face meetups. We are now doing a lot of digital connections. And we're really happy to say we're also ready to go digital with our learning experiences as well. We also do hands-on coaching and consulting. So we work with HR leaders, their teams, and business people to look at how do we start to redesign people practices to enable business agility and guide organizational design and transformation around Agile. What I wanted to do is just look at what's coming up next before we get into today's topic. So we've got lots of time to do our live Q&A towards the end. So a nice little shout out that next week we've got our next meetup, which is going to look at how do we energize our people in times of crisis. And we've got a special guest from a company called Peakon, who are actually going to share their data and findings on what people are actually asking about, talking about, and needing from their organizations to ensure that their people experience is the best it can be in these challenging times. So that's going to be a really interesting discussion. We're also really happy to announce that Rena and I have been frantically pivoting in the background, and we're ready to go with our digital practitioner program, and that's going to start on the 5th of June. And I'm really excited about this format of learning. So it's going to run over a series of 4 sprints, which allows you to actually apply skills as you go, which we all know is a great way to actually learn and apply things to the workplace over a period of time. Also, there'll then be these live virtual coaching check-ins. So there'll be times when you can actually deepen your learning with Rena and myself, reflect on your learning, as well as go away and actually apply it in the workplace. If you're interested and you want to register, please jump on our website or, of course, get in touch and we can talk you through the expectations around it. Okay, so let's get into today's discussion. How does Agile help you make tough decisions? So as a way of introduction, I'm Natal Dank and I'm one of the co-founders of the Agile HR community. And I have to say, I've been making quite a lot of tough decisions on a daily basis since the crisis has hit. I'm going to hand over to my co-founder now, Rena, to introduce herself and say a few words.
Hi everyone, so glad to see you online. Hi from Finland, my name is Rena Hellström. I am an Agile Enterprise Coach and a co-founder as well. Very keen to help HRs deal with the situation and use Agile methodologies. Glad to hear that a lot of people who went to our class are actually using what we have taught them in this situation where the environment is changing continuously and they need to reprioritize continuously what they do. So happy to start sharing a bit around that today.
Excellent. Thank you, Rena. We also have 2 very special guests. We have Phillip Gill, who's the director of LMA Consulting, and he's going to share his project where he's actually working in connection to the temporary NHS Nightingale hospitals that are happening here in the UK. So he's going to look at how he's actually been applying Agile and Scrum in particular on a day-to-day basis there. We've also got Carol Morley from Australia, who's up late to share her story about how she's had to basically just totally change what she's focusing on at work and start to look at 2 key projects to track her people and keep her people safe and informed. In terms of our agenda, this is what it looks like. We're going to do a very quick poll very soon just to see who's in the room and get a bit of feedback from you about your exposure to Agile and also how you're using it at the moment. Rena and I are then going to discuss just on a high level the core concepts around Agile and how it can help you make tough decisions. So just to set the scene and give you a little bit of kind of practical ideas to get you going. We're then going to take that into the panel discussion and we're going to hear directly from Phillip and Carol. And we've got some series of questions that they're going to answer. We're then going to do a live Q&A, and from this moment, but particularly from the panel discussion, just go into the Zoom chat and write the questions that you would like to get an answer to. And we've got an assistant in the background that's then going to pass them over to me and we'll go through them and answer as many as we can before the end of the virtual meetup. Okay, so we're going to go into our poll. Rena is going to launch that now, and that should come up on your screen. The first question is, I work in, and so just give a bit of feedback of what you do. The next one is my level of Agile experience. And then the final one is I'm using Agile practices to manage my response. So while you're doing that, I'm just going to say a few words about how we define Agile HR here at the community. And what we do is we always put that into 2 separate sections. So the first one is Agile for HR. And this is about HR professionals using the mindset and the practices to reinvent how they work. So this is embracing user-centric design. This is experimentation, evidence-based working. This is evolving our collaborative model of how we work. This is using value and prioritization to guide our work and make decisions. And this is what we're finding is totally revolutionizing our operative model, but also allowing to deliver at speed, innovate how we work, and actually start to really demonstrate the value that we bring to our organization. The other one is HR for Agile. And this is our role in business agility for the wider organization. So first of all, what are the people practices that we need to have in places like performance, reward, and learning to enable our business to respond and adapt to the complexity around us? And also, what is the design that you need at an organizational level to enable business agility? And a key part of this is guiding transformation and working with our leaders around how do you build collaborative, self-organizing teams that are customer-centric and can make data-driven decisions. So this is how we position the topic at Agile HR Community. And today we're going to be touching into both of these, but probably in particular, we're looking at Agile for HR. So we're going to look at very real-life examples of how you can use Agile tools to actually deliver projects and deliver value to your customers and your people. Rena, would you like to say a few words about what we're seeing in the poll?
Thank you. Yes, we've got a beautiful mix of people here. We've got 81% from human resources, people and culture. We've got 60%, so about a fifth of people are Agile coaching or transformation. And then we have got about 10% of people who are from another part of the business. So a great mix, and we clearly see that the HR people, we are reaching out to you a lot. My level of Agile experience, so we have some beginners, 62% are saying, I've just started to give Agile a go. And 0% say, I don't know what you're talking about. So that's good. You at least have heard about agility. You are starting to learn what that means, maybe looking into how to use that in your own work. Then we have about 23% who are supporting the Agile organizational transformation, which is a big task and important both for Agile coaches, consultants, and the HR people working especially in the Agile units. And then we have 50% working with Agile every day. And then number 3, the question, I'm using Agile practices to help manage my response to the coronavirus. There is about a third of people here saying that I'm using that every day. And another 36% saying a bit of Agile practices, and then 36% saying I'm not using Agile practices to help manage the response. So a fair bit of people have taken the Agile mindset, and that's the only thing that we can actually use in this situation where things are changing around us all the time. So Natal, do you want to add something about that? We have a brilliant mix of people who know agility, who are somewhat new to that, but still interested in using that to the response in this situation.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I would just add that if you would like to share stories in future meetups about how you're using Agile to manage your response and work with your people, please get in touch, because this is what this is all about, sharing stories in the community and learning from each other. I'm also very excited to have lots of fellow HR and people and culture people on the line, which is always exciting. So what we're going to do is Rena and I are just going to say a few words around Agile mindset, and in particular looking at a couple of key aspects or elements of Agile that feed into the topic of how we make tough decisions. So first of all, I want to just set the scene around Agile mindset. And this is all about customer value. So it's about placing the customer at the heart of what we do, and then looking how we incrementally, so piece by piece, deliver value to that customer. And the reason we want to working in that incremental way is because it generates this feedback loop. So this loop of inspect, learn, and adapt. And this is about validating the value that we're delivering. So are we delivering the right thing? Can we check in with our customer? Can we use that feedback to then drive the next piece of work? Also, can we constantly validate and check how we're working? So the tools we're using, how we're collaborating, the behaviors we have, the team dynamics we have, the decisions that we're making. So we're constantly looking at improving both what we're working on and how we're doing it. And this is this incremental process. The feedback loop is such a powerful way of driving continuous improvement, both at a team level, but also an organizational level. And we're going to explore these concepts today. Another key part of this is to make these rapid decisions and to be able to adjust and flex based on customer needs. Information needs to be transparently shared. So we need to know what's going on at any one time, and we need to all be in part of that information sharing. So transparency really drives the Agile ways of working. And this feeds into one of the most powerful parts of it, which is let's get our great people that we hire to do great things by helping them self-organizing, giving them the tools to make the decisions themselves and respond directly to that customer. And this is the hand in hand with the transparency. What it is that traditionally, we've had a lot of handovers in how we work. We've got deferred decisions. We go up and down the sort of the pyramid to get things done. And ultimately, this slows us down. It also means the decisions are happening further away from that end customer. And so Agile says, let's put the skills that we need in the team to get things done. So we make these cross-functional, what we call T-shaped teams. And this is where we start to break down silos and work much more end-to-end and have value chains starting to appear within the organization and also within HR. We take all these concepts and we put them into the HR space when we talk about Agile HR. And what I find so powerful is this focus in on the customer means we become very people-centric. So what do our people need to make our business a success and deliver value to that end customer? And this is a very powerful way of working because it gives you a way of validating and defining the value at any one time and also clearly prioritizing where you should spend your time. I don't know about you, but I was a HR professional for many years that had the biggest wish list of all time and thought I could get everything done from transforming the culture of the organization through to making sure people got paid on time. So this is all about how do we make sure we're working on the right things, what is realistic and possible, and where do we spend time first, where do we spend it second, and what might we not do based on the situation we've got in front of us. If we then take this into the coronavirus situation, it becomes even more kind of prevalent and relevant to how we're working. So when we look at value, particularly in Agile HR, Rena and I always look at sort of three levels that very much interconnect with each other. So we're looking at employee value. What do our people need? We're looking at business value. So what does our business need to actually run, to make money, to be a success, to design products, or to maybe shift direction? And then what does that mean for our end customer? So what is the value flowing through to that end customer? And if we look at these three levels in the coronavirus situation, it really can help us start to prioritize how we're working and the decisions we need to make. So for example, for some businesses, your end customer is either you can't actually work with them at all at the moment because that part of the business is completely shut down. You can't actually deliver any products and services to that customer. You could be in an organization that actually one part or even your key product is now in serious demand. So you could be a supermarket, you could be an online retailer, you could be something like Zoom, where everyone is now using your product. So you're needing to think about, well, how do I actually shift capacity over here to actually deliver the value to this end customer? So first of all, whatever's happening with your end customer is going to start to dictate the decisions you're needing to make in the business space. We then look at the business. So if we can't deliver any value to our customer, what does that mean? Do we need to shut down parts of that business? What does that look like? How would we make that happen? Or can we actually get people at home working to still keep the operations going? What does that mean? Do we need to now shift capacity somewhere else to actually deliver more value or more energy and product in a certain place? Is there an area where we can now use our energy for a key project that's going to actually help the situation? So if we then start with the customer and we move back to the business, we need to see, all right, what is the strategic decisions as a business of where we spend our time and where we shift our capacity? This then flows back into the employee. So as in HR, we're then going, what do our people need? So if we're needing to work from home, how do we make that happen? How do we ensure they're safe? How do we make sure that they're in touch, they're informed, and their well-being is protected? If we're needing to shut down a whole part of the business, what does this mean? How do we make these decisions? What does follow mean for our business? How are we making sure we're having a human response to this change that might need to be taking place? So these are the decisions that we're needing to make. And it's about thinking about that connection between the employee value, business value, and custom value. And this happens on the organizational level and then flows into your team and project level. So you're then thinking, you're looking at, okay, this is the thing that we're needing to focus on and deliver. How do we prioritize the right things to work on? Why? And how we then checking in, reprioritizing. You would need to be almost doing that on a daily, even more basis at the moment because things are changing so rapidly. Another key thing is this self-organization and transparency. So Rena and I, when we were talking about this topic, we were talking about how we've heard so many great stories of people opening these complex problems up to the people in their organization. So how do we keep our business alive? How do we shift capacity? If we do need to shut down parts of the business, what does that look like? What do our people want in terms of furlough or pay cuts, these kind of things? So it does vary on the context of your organization and how big you are. But the way, if you can invite people into these decisions, you will be amazed by the energy of diversity of thought and the solutions that can come out of it. So that's a few words on kind of value feeding into prioritization. I'm going to hand over to Rena to add her view on that and then move into the concept of risk and value in Agile and how that can feed into making tough decisions at this time.
HR people usually are not really good at looking at the business value and the KPIs of what we're doing. What we in Agile we are value hunters. So what we want to see is have a clear North Star. What are we creating and why? What are the KPIs and values that we're looking for to generate with what the product that we are creating? I'm talking about the product. You can replace that word with a service or a process or any deliverable. So for example, I was working with a team that wanted to create a website for their internal staff about the coronavirus situation. So what would the value drivers be of that project, for instance? And we discussed this, and they thought, well, users, how many users is an important KPI. And it's like, well, does it really tell you anything if there are 1,000 users coming one time to your website? So we worked with this quite a lot, and we decided that, for instance, we want to get feedback of the usefulness of that website is important. We want to have the returning people KPI. How many people are returning for new information to that website? Then we can know it's useful and people are getting relevant information from that. Then the number of questions that HR gets about the actual information that sits on that website is also a good metric to know that it's useful. So we were looking at these KPIs, how to build KPIs around the value that we want to generate. And this is quite important. So if you want to start working in an agile way, and even using this for the coronavirus situation, always have the value drivers thought out. What are the most important things that we want to create? And that should drive your prioritization, because there will always be too much on your backlog, always too much to do. So that helps you prioritize. The other part is the risk. So how much risk? Sorry, my kid is coming here. Sorry. Give me a second. Can even Natal take this a bit?
And one of the key risks, of course, in the coronavirus is when your child turns up to join your virtual meetup, which I think many of us are now experiencing.
Kids. So the other part is the risk. We cannot just drive value, but we need to start thinking about the risk. There are two types of risk that I usually bring up with the Agile teams. It's first of all, what's the risk if we don't do this part of this chunk of work? What are we missing out on? Are we missing out on generating value? Are we missing out on revenue? Are we missing out on maybe creating some health risks? We need to think about that as well. The other part with the risks is, if we start working on this chunk of work, is there a big risk of us failing with that? Is it too big? Is it too complex? Can we chunk that down into smaller bits and minimize the risk? Or can we validate what we're doing with smaller mock-ups or something to see that we're not wasting time on working on a big chunk of work, which is risky to fail? So there are both these parts, value and risk, that we need to think about when we are prioritizing our backlogs as we work in a continuously changing environment.
Okay, so we've set the scene around the concepts of, in particular, value, prioritization, and assessing risk. And we've talked a lot about this need to shift capacity, focus on the right things at the right moment in time, and then start to deliver value piece by piece incrementally. And our two panel guests today are going to talk exactly about that. So let's move into that discussion. So first of all, we have Phillip Gill from LMA Consulting, and I'm going to ask Phillip to say a couple of words to introduce himself and say about what he's working on at the moment.
Thanks, Natal. Good morning, everyone. So yes, I'm an independent consultant, background in HR, been independent for more years than I care to remember. The last few years I've been working with some NHS organisations around identity and how you prove identity and how you can transfer identity across organisations, because we have a lot of staff moving about, and obviously more so during the current COVID-19 situation. And I've been doing some work around the Nightingale hospitals and how we get people, how we know people are who they say they are when they turn up, and how we get them access to systems to allow them to help patients.
I'm really excited by what Phil's been working on, and I've noticed that I've turned into an Australian and I've already shortened your name, so sorry about that.
No, that's no problem at all.
But I did warn you that was coming.
Yep.
So it's great to have you today, and it's so amazing for you to hear stories connected to the Nightingale hospitals that are happening here in the UK, which is these temporary hospitals being set up to help with the coronavirus overflow in our health system. Our other key guest is Carol Morley from Tabcorp, who has stayed up late in Australia to join us today. Carol, can you say a few words?
Hi, everyone. Not too late, only 7:30, but yeah, past the workday. I'm Carol. I'm originally from the US and have been in Australia about 12 years. And background is in HR business partnering and HR strategy. And about 5 years ago, have moved into business and performance improvement and program direction. And I'm absolutely in love with Agile HR. And I've been with Tabcorp now for about 2 years, joined the team as a contractor and employee experience, focused on basically building purpose, values, visions. Tabcorp has recently merged with another company. And how do you have this new company identity, you know, kind of what you're saying, Philip, on a different scale? How do you embed that? And I'm happy to share my story.
Fantastic. And we'll find that Carol had to basically down tools on some of that and actually shift her focus as a result of coronavirus. So we're going to go into the panel discussion. I'm going to ask Phillip and Carol a series of questions, and throughout that, please let us know the questions you would like us all to answer in the end of the session. So in Zoom chat, please put your questions in, and we've got someone that's then going to pull all the questions out and then pass them over to me, and we can answer them at the end of the panel discussion. So Phillip, I'd like to start with yourself. And it'd be great to hear a little bit more about the NHS Nightingale project that you're working on, and in particular, how Agile has helped you get the project running up and very quickly, and how you're delivering value through this project.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, the UK's decided to take over a number of convention centres to set up these temporary Nightingale hospitals near major centres of the population, some in the north, some in the Midlands. Obviously the one in London I've been working with very closely, and one's just being set up in the southwest as well. And the idea is that once people are past needing the most acute care, when they need to be looked after and monitored 24 hours a day, they can go into the Nightingale hospitals where they're still monitored regularly, but perhaps are less poorly, and to allow throughput into other hospitals. So the other thing the UK has done is asked a lot of recently retired staff to rejoin the health service, and we've had about 30,000 healthcare professionals volunteer. To access clinical systems in these hospitals, that they need effectively a chip and PIN card. And what I was asked to do was stand up a national service for printing these cards and getting them to these 30,000 people in 7 days. So I'd been working with the same team, and we've been using Agile for about 3 or 4 years now. Well, actually longer than that. And so we just decided we needed to be really, really ruthless. What was the minimum viable product that would allow people to deliver healthcare? Forget about any bells and whistles. Forget about any nice to haves. What must we have? So we, over 7 days, first day we designed the service. So we ran a daily stand-up meeting, and we had Agile as this concept of sprints. The normal sprints I've worked with have tended to be 2 to 4 weeks. Here we had daily sprints. So what was the sprint goal? What did we need to achieve today? And we held a stand-up in the morning, stand-up at the end of the day. People had various tasks. Came back. So on the first day, the sprint goal was design the service. The second day was recruit the volunteers who were going to print these cards. The third day was train these volunteers and give them all the necessary inductions, find out what equipment they needed. Fourth day was ensure they had all the hardware and software they needed. And on the fifth day, we needed to start printing cards, and we printed 1,800 on the first day. So it really, we had lots of ideas about how it would be nicer for people, how we could offer, a better form of induction, but really, given the time constraints that we were under, it just had to be, must we do this? And anything that we didn't have to do just didn't get done. It's on our backlog because we would like to enhance service, and it's likely now we've stood this up that we'll keep it mothballed for should we have other crises, because we've got a series of trained people who are prepared to turn their hands to it and work flexible hours to allow it to be done. So that was it really. I got known as the man who says no. My background is my Agile qualification is I'm a certified Scrum product owner, and if you look at a lot of the stuff around product owners, one of the things is really, really being absolutely viciously focused on value, and if it doesn't meet the value criteria, you say no.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic, real practical example of how you apply Agile. And I think what's interesting, shift to daily sprints and daily goals to make sure you can actually deliver this out. And so it's a great story. Thank you so much. We're going to come back and ask a few more questions. I'd like to just go over to Carol now as well and bring Carol into the conversation. And Carol, a little bit different to Phil, because Phil's had this experience of being a product owner and a team that's used Agile for many years. But at Tabcorp, and I think a lot of people relate to this, Agile's quite new, particularly in the HR space. So can you tell me a bit about the elements of Agile that you've started to bring in to the teams that you're working, and how this has then shaped your response on the 2 projects that you've now needed to focus on at Tabcorp?
Well, do you, Natal? So Agile HR very new to Tabcorp. I'm the only person that's gone through the training. We do have a new chief people officer that's worked with Agile before, so there's some great sponsorship there. But what ended up happening, when pre-coronavirus, I was focused on a program about building a culture dashboard for board reporting. And then when COVID hit, we kind of say pre-COVID, current COVID, we had to ruthlessly prioritize. I mean, pretty much all of the work that we were doing in the employee experience team was paused, and we had to think about, okay, so what's most important now? The 2 projects that I've been working on during this time period, one is a people tracker. It's allowing us to track movements and decisions during this time period. And the complexity around that is at Tabcorp, we have 3 very different consumer brands. And they have different customers, and they are run by separate managing directors. So trying to report at a group level employee movements was quite challenging because each business was capturing information in a different way. The second project that I've been working with is standing up a team member hotline. So the way the HR team is structured at Tabcorp, we use the Ulrich model. We've got business partners aligned to those business units. And then we've got our core centers of excellence. Obviously, we've got 5,000 employees going through a really rough time, difficult decisions having to be made. The business partners really needed to focus on the strategies with their leaders, but our employees were going through a difficult time. And so we made the decision that we needed to give an outlet to our employees. We were able to look at the data regarding EAP, employees weren't using it. So we decided to stand up an internal team member hotline. We didn't have any kind of team member support hotline before, like a people services hotline. So we did have a people operations team, and we were able in 3 days to get the telephony, build up the access, and start promoting this particular helpline. And I think Agile comes into play with both of those, in that we had to build it quickly, and we had to be really clear about what the purpose was, like what was that minimal lovable product that we needed. For the tracker, there's so much information that we could have tracked. I mean, there's infinite number of things that people might be interested in. But what we decided is to only look at people movements. We weren't at that point tracking fluctuations in leave uptake. We weren't looking at any of the other levers that we could use financially to get through this period. We focused just on movements. And then for the helpline, 2-prong, the purpose was create capacity for BPs and provide a human connection for our employees. So the helpline, when we stood it up, we didn't have a huge FAQ. This is one of those balance of value versus risk. We were really concerned that if we went out and people called and we didn't have answers for them, that that would actually be a bad experience. And actually, to be able to hear an understanding voice, that would listen, would actually outweigh perhaps, hey, we'll have to call you back, or we'll have to look into that for you. I think the other elements of Agile, because we're new and we didn't have scrums and we don't have necessarily some of the formal practices in place, but we have been making sure that the teams are being stood up cross-functionally. They're not following our traditional lines of reporting, and that's allowing us for actually making sure that we've got the right skill set. We're iterating. So like with the tracker, we built a prototype, tested it out with one team, and then refined it before we actually took it out more broadly. With the helpline, we're continually updating our FAQs. We're tracking what information is getting the highest number of calls, and then that's what we build out. And we've promoted it as well. Like we've built a website for people to get information, and we're sending out electronic notices if people want to have a call as well. So those are the two things that I think best show kind of what we're doing agilely now.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's really interesting is both examples demonstrate that, you know, given the crisis, you just have to start making decisions around MVP, value, what is the most important thing to work on. And sometimes we have a bit more luxury, and so we can debate these things a bit more, we can kind of spend a bit more time, but no, we've just got to deliver. So I think it's amazing how it sort of focuses people on how you use Agile in a great way. Thank you so much, Carol. I'm going to go back to Phillip. And Phillip, you talked a lot around getting this team going, you know, realizing that you had to not just do two weekly sprints, you're going to have to do daily sprints, daily goals, different kind of ceremonies and activities. So this is constantly evolving your operating model. And I know we talked a lot about this when we connected the other day. So how are you finding that you're needing to evolve your operating model through this project, and what does that look like? Gives a bit of a taste of that. You know, is it even on a daily basis? What does this look like?
Okay, so for the first week, we just had the laser focus on being able to print cards. So the first week we tended to operate. Every day was very, very similar. We've now been asked to look at other things related to identity and access, and it's evolved in the sense that now we've been able to move to a 3-day sprint for some things, a week-long sprint for others. I'm sort of working across 2 teams at the moment. What we're finding is we had to take a bit of a punt during the first setup work, because we weren't able to take as much user feedback as we would have liked. It effectively involved putting up some wireframes. This is how the service is going to look, going out to 2 friendly faces and saying, how do you think this will be received? Which isn't particularly empirical. But since then, we've managed to get a group of people who we're able to run design ideas past. We've got an extended team in terms of we're much closer and are interacting much more with our stakeholders, which has been really valuable, because what worked in that really, really short-term crisis has been proven that we need to adapt it for some of the other things we're doing. So that's really good. We are getting prototypes out there. I've got some very, very unsophisticated post-it note diagrams of how things might work, and I'm a terrible drawer. But we've been able to use some online collaboration tools. One we use is Mural, which is a virtual whiteboard. We've been able to use that with some of our stakeholders and move things about. We're giving stakeholders access to our online Kanban board. We're having to use an electronic one. We're using something called Trello, and we're giving our stakeholders access to that, and we're having regular calls with our stakeholders where they would say, well, I think you need to think about this, I think you need to think about that. So the model is constantly evolving in how we operate, being able to take that rapid feedback and evolve and iterate as a result. It's very, very energizing.
But also I imagine pretty intense. So where are you at now? Are you able to shift into more, I imagine particularly that 7 days was quite intense. Are you moving to sort of how do we do more sustainable kind of hours and things like that? Where are you at? So
yes, we're at more sustainable hours now. Although while I've been on this, a bunch of Slack notifications have come in to the corner of my window, and I'm being asked to do something else that might involve some crazy hours. But there we go. I think it's the
It's the nature
of a
the
crisis.
day. Yeah,
I'll be
exactly.
taking a long holiday afterwards. But yes, more sustainable. And to pick up on what Carol's been saying, we've not just been treating staff as automatons. We have been making sure there's space in the daily scrums or the sprint reviews that now we're able to get to, that we are looking at people's well-being. We really do insist that when we have our video interactions, people have got their video camera on. So because we've got a lot of people who don't like saying no and will work ridiculous hours if we let them, but being able to see them and see fatigue, it's those non-verbal elements of listening really. And yeah, everyone's okay, but we are moving to a more sustainable model now.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing story, and I think what's really interesting is all done virtually, given the nature of where we're at. So Agile can be virtual. That's the message here. Excellent, thank you, Phil. Carol, over to you, and then we're going to do some questions from the other participants in the meetup. So an important part of Agile HR and making tough decisions is working evidence-based, and Rena and I kind of talked a bit about that at the start. Can you tell me a bit about how you've used data to drive your decisions in these projects that you're working on?
Perhaps I'll talk about the tracker, because I think that one's a real clear example where we've used data not just to build the tracker, but the whole purpose of it is to provide evidence and data for people to make the decisions that they need to about what's going to happen with the business. So when we were building the tracker, we looked at a lot of qualitative evidence. Because there had been kind of a people tracker called a people map at the time of integration, we had a lot of feedback about what worked and didn't work about that tracker. And that informed that we needed to make sure it was easy to use. We needed to make sure that this new tracker would open remotely. Supposedly the previous one was such a big database it just crashed. And the third one is that we didn't want to overcomplicate it. So what was important? Knowing that things were going to evolve, we wanted to make sure that we built something that wasn't so sophisticated that it couldn't change and iterate. So we're using a basic Excel sheet with a number of macros and formulas in it that allows for different business partners in different locations to do input, and then we'll roll up into summaries. So it's really simple. There's not a lot of science behind it, but it gives us the combined picture. And the other thing that we had to do is, as I mentioned, the different business units used kind of different terminology. So by working through with the different businesses about using the terms, we were able to standardize that. And the only way that we could do that was by giving, being really transparent to say, help us build the new tracker by showing what you're already doing. We want to make it easy. We want to, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So people were much more open to sharing what they were currently using. We took that kind of, that evidence to build the new tracker, and then we tested it out and refined it. And the evidence that we used to help with decision making for our senior leaders, being really clear about what were those key metrics that we needed to track. And because we've actually kept it to, we've got 7 metrics that we're tracking, it doesn't, it takes out a lot of the noise about what's important, what's not important. Mm-hmm. They can have really robust discussions and interrogate the data on those key 7 metrics, and it's consistent across all of the different business units. So you're comparing apples to apples. And then right now we're finalizing conversations around those. We can now expand the tracker to see, okay, so what else is important? What else do we need to put into this picture? But that foundation is now really strong.
Yeah, no, it's again a really great story of how you match it to what's needed at the time, which is the business problem, and then start to look at the data you already have and start to use that for real-time decisions. And I know Rena and I get quite passionate about the topic of, in HR, we get obsessed with collecting all the data, making it all pretty, making it all right, before we even start actually analysing the data and doing people analytics. Well, actually, you need to start with a business problem and map the data to that, isn't it? So you can enable those real-time decisions. So great,
Absolutely.
great example there. Thank you. So thank you so much. I know we've also got people in the chat saying, "Oh my God, Phil, you're amazing," and this story has just blown me away. So well done! Big round of applause for Phil and his team. So I'm going to use the final part of our meetup to look at some of the questions that have come in, and I'm going to throw them over to Phillip, Carol, and Rena. I'm going to get into those, and there's the first question, which is a great question, and I'm going to ask yourself, Phillip, first, and then I'm also going to ask Rena to add a few things, and then the one after that I'll send to you, Carol. So the first one is about how do you balance the creation of a minimal viable product, or sometimes as we call it, a minimal lovable product. So how do you balance the creation of an MVP with brand identity of a company? So especially as some teams may be in search for the perfect product for their rollout. And so you talked a bit about this concept of MVP and forget the bells and whistles. So can you talk us through a little bit about getting that balance in your project?
Yeah, that's a great question. We started off and lots of people saying, well, we need to do this, you know, and what about company reputation and things like that? At the end of the day, this is a card that's in a machine that's helping people save lives by being able to access clinical data. So I just kept reiterating the business problem. How are we giving clinical staff access to data and does anything else really matter? And really sort of pulled on the heartstrings a bit. You know, do we really want to get in the way? I have done other agile projects with the same group of people where brand identity has been and corporate reputation has come into play a lot. And you know, I think you need to recognise that some of these stakeholders are quite important, quite powerful. And we're never going to get to a perfect product. If we get to a perfect product, it's going to take ages to release things. And we'll make a hell of a lot of assumptions that we'll then need to go back and fix. So it was trying to persuade some of these key stakeholders in one-on-one conversations about the value of the iterative approach, giving them examples of some of the places where iterative approaches have been used. And I fall back that there's a book some of you know called The Lean Startup that talks about how Amazon's set up. And the first thing was a very little portal. Would you buy books online? Yes or no? And when people can see that companies like Amazon, like Dropbox, have all used this iterative approach to get feedback. And the other really good example is Dyson. Dyson, when he invented his dual cyclone vacuum cleaner, went through about 5,000 iterations. And when people can see these products that are seen as innovative, high profile, you know, they're brands that are up there, and you say, we want to try the same approach, you know, maybe that starts to persuade people a little bit more about the value of iteration and making clear that actually in the great scheme of things, if we get valuable feedback, it stops us going down sort of paths that are dead ends and allows us to focus on what is real value.
Yeah, definitely. And I often, in the HR space, I often talk about how what is perfect what you think it looks like, or is perfect people actually engaging with it and using it and finding it valuable. And that's what you need to get to, don't you? Great. Great sort of words there, Phil. Can I go over to Rena? Rena, would you like to add a couple of things around this topic of getting this balance between the creation of MVP and the brand and identity of your company?
Yeah, first of all, I would go to the question. I think the question is interesting, and I wouldn't put it that way. So I would say, how would you balance the creation of an MVP with any of the requirements that come in? It can be brand identity, it can be functionality, it can be some features that there are, as Phil said, stakeholders that think it's very important to have this in. So given an example, if you in HR are creating a minimum viable product for a landing page for your recruitment, there the employment branding might be really important. What it looks like, what the feel, what's the emotion when you get there, and you might validate that to the minimum viable product before you release that. If you are creating an in-house way of creating your travel expenses or getting your travel expenses back, it's not that important what it looks like as long as I get my money, right? So it's also, again, coming back to the value drivers. What are the value drivers of what we are trying to achieve? What are the risks? If the travel expense system doesn't look that nice, what's the risk? Not that big. If the employer branding, the landing page doesn't look that nice, what's the risk? Quite high with business value and employer value. So I think that the question is interesting. I would just say, how do you balance anything with the MVP?
Yeah, great. And also a nice link back to the concepts of risk and value and the assessments that we were making at the start around those tough decisions. Excellent. So thank you so much. So I'm going to move into a question specifically for Carol from Owen, which is, what obstacles did you encounter when making decisions faster and releasing the basic MLP or minimal lovable product version? So what sort of obstacles did you come up? Sort of links a bit to what we've just been talking about as well.
Absolutely. Great question. I think the biggest one is people wanting to have what they thought was important included in what the product was going to look like. So, for example, with the tracker, additional measures, and I always have to come back to the question is, and what would you use that information for? So, a variation of, and so what's the problem that you're trying to solve? In addition, when it came to the helpline, and people wanted to say, well, we can't actually go live until we do have all of these answers. And we just had to ask, well, what is it we really need employees to actually come to a central place? Isn't it better to get it out as soon as possible? Yeah. Because if we don't, then we're most likely going to continue to have our business partners going to be at overcapacity. So it was always coming back to that central value driver.
Yeah. So getting it out, getting things up and running, and then building on the kind of the nice to haves from there. We've got a question from Martin, and this was, how do you negotiate the autonomy and authority to progress without the need for committees or cumbersome approval processes? Do you negotiate a certain level of autonomy at the start? So this is a fantastic question, and this is very much linked into the organizational design of Agile. Philip, would you like to have a quick kind of sort of go at that? And then I can also get Rena's view on that one.
I think it's fair to say the current circumstances have meant I haven't had to negotiate some of the hoops I would in other situations. What I try and do is stay close to my stakeholders. I find certainly my senior stakeholders, if they're happy and they're aware of the approach that we're adopting and what business problem we're trying to solve, and can get an idea of the iterations of the product we're likely to release, then they support you by passing committees or have a very much slimmed down process. I think if you don't engage them, then it does become problematic, and more people want to see the detail and kick the tires and look under the bonnet. And I'm sure there are other motor car metaphors that I've forgotten. But I think if you stay close to people, if you keep on pushing the whole agile philosophy, the fact that we are going to get rapid feedback, what we've got today isn't necessarily what we're going to have tomorrow, and you can constantly spend time persuading people why that's a good idea, then it becomes less problematic. And without naming the organisation I'm in, I am in a really bureaucratic organisation, so it can be done.
That's good to know. Rita, would you like to add a couple of words to this question? I know it's near to your heart.
It's a big question, and my take on this is I go to the stakeholders and to the sponsors and say, we need mandate. If you want us to deliver this in a shorter period of time, we need mandate to make decisions, and we'll come to you with, midway we'll come to you, show demos what we're doing and get your feedback, but we can't have all those steering groups and committees, etc. They're going to slow us down. So I need that mandate to run this project or product development in an agile way. And then we discuss what it means, and we create the constraints? Are there constraints? When do you want to know something? Do you want to know when we go over a certain limit in a budget? And then I'll take care of those stakeholders according to what we agreed. But I make it really clear that I don't want to have any steering groups, messing with our work to make us slow down. And that is a conversation that I recommend to have up front.
Yeah, in most situations, let's be honest. So mostly every project I know needs an element of that, and the bigger the project, the more you need it. So excellent. And I think also, particularly in the HR space, it's really good to get these mandates up front, because employee experience is not this kind of defined entity, and there's always these quirky aspects to it, and there's lots of opinions and views that goes around on what people want and need versus what is the actual evidence. Great. So I'm just going to do the final question that came in, and then we'll wrap up. So, but this will be a nice quick one to finish up on. And this one is for you, Phil. You talked about flexing and adapting agile frameworks, such as reducing the time for scrums. How do you ensure the balance between adapting the frameworks for your needs and then staying close to the original framework so it works? What's your sort of views on that?
Well, I think the framework does lend itself to being adapted. I think that, when you look at the original Agile Manifesto, I think that was what was in people's minds, that, you have a much more flexible approach. I'm not so much of a fan of flexing it the other way. I've had people say, well, surely we can have a month sprint or a 2-month sprint. Month sprint, you need to put things in place. 2 months, it's starting to feel a little bit waterfally to me. But I believe my reading of the framework is such that it's about focusing on value. We're still focusing on value. We're still focusing on minimum viable product. We've still got the team self-organizing. We've still got stay very close to our stakeholders and constantly demonstrate to them and what have you. And I think as long as you keep those principles alive, you're staying true to the model.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. And Rena, would you like to say final words to wrap us up on that one?
Sure. What we discussed with Natal as well, and what we're teaching in our classes, is that we teach you a range of the frameworks, the tools, the methods, etc. And that becomes a library. And the whole Agile mindset is about do something that works and improve. So if nothing else, I've said Agile can be also just visualizing your work and having a retrospective. What can we do? How can we work in a better way? You don't have to take all of those frameworks and do disciplined Scrum to be Agile. It's a mindset, and you can build, and you can use some parts, and you can build on it and improve as you go. And that's all right, I think.
Fantastic. So on that note, we will leave you to all your different contexts that are out there dealing with the crisis. A massive thank you to Phil or Phillip. I alternated throughout the session, and to Carol that has stayed up and definitely now deserves, it's Wednesday. Oh, you can still have an evening wine, I think, probably, Carol. We'll all go back in this other time zone to some coffees. I've had some lovely feedback coming through in chat about the insights that were shared in this discussion. It's been really, really great and really practical. I hope you got the same out of it. And I look forward, and so does Rena, to seeing you next week, where we actually touch into some of the things we talked about, which is keeping our people engaged and taking care of them in the times of crisis. So thank you so much for joining us today.